into this latest edition of Unidentified History, getting off to a much later start than I anticipated. Um, it's always fun stuff with computers, man. I gotta tell you, always something fun happening. Like ChatGPT logging me out of my account and not recognizing my logins, which is always fun. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on, guys. It's the same. It's like trying to revert me to the old phone login. But anyway, you guys don't care about that tonight. Hope everybody's doing really well. Hope you've had a good week. Craziness going on in the world of UAP stuff, all that sort of fun stuff happening. The purpose of tonight's episode is to recap at least my experience from Contact in the Desert 2026. And obviously, if you go to Contact in the Desert at all, you can't do it all, that sort of thing. It's like, it's not like Pokemon where you can catch it all, or it's not like going to UAP Summit where, it's just one program and you can catch everything. This is more like going to feel a lot like Conscious Life Expo when I did that recap of that event. It's just my perspective from the panels I went to and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, hey, Ricky, what's up, man? Good to see you tonight, buddy. Um, yeah, talking about Contact in the Desert 2026 and just a lot of stuff to talk about here tonight, that sort of thing. I'm going to recap the event, at least from my perspective, as I indicated, like the stuff I saw, the panels I went to, the things I experienced. I'm going to do that. We're also going to talk about Lou Elizondo's Persona Non Grata event from Los Angeles that was back on June 4th. I did go and check that out, so kind of give a recap of that. And I think I'll close this out. I did watch the Accidental Truth Next documentary, Ron James follow up to the phenomenal Accidental Truth that took place 2023. So I'll be talking about that a little bit. But let me get into Contact in the Desert 2026. If you have never, last year I went, and I had just kind of expanded Attitude of Aggression over into the UAP side of the thing, right? And I went there for all of like one day. My son and I went over there just to check things out. And it was really a cool event. We got to do the stargazing event. I still got some videos I need to send over to to Dan Zetterstrom over at What It Means to Be Human to have him check this stuff out. And it was a great event. And I left there thinking, man, I really wish I could have gone longer. Well, I fixed that this year because I went for 3 days this year. So I went Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Saw a lot of stuff. It is an unbelievable event, and this year was probably, I mean, from everybody I've talked to and everybody I met and interacted with, this year's event had a lot more people than last year, and I can vouch for that. That the Friday events and the Saturday events and the Sunday events had a lot of people there, tons of people there, a lot of people engaged. It was an unbelievable event on every front possible. I've met a lot of people over the past year doing, ever since I started expanding Attitude of Aggression and went into Unidentified History and started doing that. I've talked to a lot of people, and this is even before the whole X account, disaster took place and I got suspended. And I was meeting so many people and talking to so many people and developing a lot of friendships. And this event was great because I got to meet a lot of those people in person. And, I'm talking about people like Dan Zetterstrom, who I just mentioned from What It Means to Be Human. Got to meet him in person. Roz, who is the co-host of that show, she was awesome. Got to meet them. Got to see Dr. Rizwan Virk, author of the Simulation Hypothesis. Got to congratulate him on becoming a doctor, getting his PhD. And we talked a little bit about Simulation Hypothesis. So I got to talk to him. Got to meet Dan Cleary from from the Doomer Friday aspect of things. Got to meet Pavel Ibarra. Was really looking forward to meeting Pavel. Got to meet Pavel, his wife, and one of their pups was up there. Pavel's just a super cool guy. Got to meet one of the guys and hang out with Dwayne Owen from Pavel's Discord chat. We sat through Chris Ramsey's event, which I will talk about in a little bit, and just so many cool people that I interacted with. and got a chance to talk to, and just, I mean, and there's all sorts of other people around as well. Got to meet Vinny Adams from Disclosure Team. Vinny, who's, you know, really a big fan of Vinny's stuff. And I know Vinny and Dan did the whole phenomenology thing that tied into, you know, their show. And it was just such an awesome event to be around all those people and to talk to people and just, you know, you meet people, you talk to people, and there's at least one person I'm going to mention as we go along who I was absolutely thrilled to meet. But I got to see, you know, UAP Gerb was sitting there, Rob Jones was sitting there, he was hanging out at places, all that whole side of the team. Chris Ramsey was very accessible. Chris Bledsoe, you know, Beatrice Villarreal was in a lot of the seminars. A lot of people in the audience. You just get to talk to people. Danny Sheehan, Whitley Strieber, all those guys are milling around. So that was really cool. I mean, I cannot stress enough what an amazing event Contact in the Desert 2026 was, just from the standpoint of seeing these people. You watch their shows and you talk to them all the time. And you know, you may interact with them in other places, but to actually, you know, Martin Wills from That UFO podcast, he was no, I mean that's Andy's. That UFO podcast is Andy's. Martin Wills is UFO podcast or something. I don't remember all the names of it, but you know, it was tremendous to just see all these people there, and just an unbelievable event. So let me kind of go through the panels that I went through and at least what I can remember from them, and I'll look in and I'll pull up some of the I'll pull up like I got some pictures and stuff that I took that may help me recall what was going on. So let's see what I can do. All right. So like I had planned on getting over there like for the early event, like 9 o'clock Friday morning. I did not make it. I'll put it that way. I got a late start getting out of Bakersfield. It was a little bit tired, stuck around a little bit longer and worked on some things. So I did get over there. The first panel I saw was the Tim Gallaudet lecture, which was 11 o'clock on Friday. What was it? The 28th, 29th. Sorry. So I got to go there and catch Tim Gallaudet's lecture, and that was pretty good. Tim, you know, one of the things that was really came across as being something I was very pleased about with this conference is that, you know, the day before Contact in the Desert, the government pulls that bullshit on the aliens.gov website and pissed off a lot of people, a lot of people I'm involved with. None of us thought the joke was very funny. We felt it was a big troll job. You know, I really sincerely hope that the people who own the rights to the music for X-Files sued the shit out of the United States government for taking their, or at least sue the shit out of the White House for stealing their song. And I cannot imagine that they gave them authority to do that or that they paid the copyright owners what they should have paid them to use the rights to that song. But they just trolled the fuck out of the UFO community with this whole X-Files recap. They're walking amongst us, blah, blah, all this shit that they did just for it to be an immigration website. I'll talk about how that landed when I get to the Lou Elizondo thing a little bit later on. And okay. And yeah, now we got Mike in here as well. And Mike, I want to stress to everybody, that driving down to LA and back on the 4th, I did get a chance to watch / listen, because it was a little bit, it was watching the first part and then listening. Mike did a fantastic interview with Ty Roberts for a Total Disclosure podcast. And really, they talked for almost 3 hours and they got into all sorts of stuff about Mike's experience and his unique story as far as his event and what he experienced and all the stuff that has gone on. And you know, we're going to talk a lot about whistleblowers in this episode. I will tell you guys that. Mike's another one who's been victimized by some, you know, bullshit. Let's just put it that way. That's gone on with the government. Different than the guys we're going to talk about. Different, but the same sort of concept of things. Just a lot of bullshit. But anyway, getting back to this event, the Tim Gallaudet lecture was good. Tim was really, you know, he wasn't pleased at all with the whole aliens.gov nonsense. Nobody was. And the other thing I was pleased about was to realize that, you know, I did two parts of one episode talking about the UFO file drops, and I called it Distrolsure, which I probably should have trademarked. Um, and a lot of people agreed with me on that. And everybody at Contact in the Desert, most people were less than impressed with what the government has released on the files. And for good reason, because a lot of it is just nonsensical. A lot of the videos don't show anything. A lot of it is stuff we've seen before. A lot of it is the stuff that's easily debunked. So there's not anything very compelling. The documents, there's some good stuff in the documents. So we talked about on the last episode in the FBI documents and the things that go back to like 1947 and the stuff that happened here in Bakersfield, which is like really. And then in the second drop, they had the stuff from Sandia Labs, which was very compelling and interesting to learn how it correlates with the Green Fireballs event that was taking place and how we got to the point that, you've got a definite interest in whatever this phenomenon is in nuclear sites and things like that a good 20 years before anything happened out at Malmstrom Air Force Base. So that was pretty cool. But going back to Tim's lecture, Tim didn't really say a whole lot that we hadn't already heard before. I think like the big thing I took from Tim's lecture was, and he showed quite a few like the naval ship logs and things like that, and people who had found things in the naval ship logs that they wanted to report, and that was kind of unique and interesting to hear and take a look at. But honestly, like there wasn't a whole lot, and I'm trying to get to see if I recorded anything from there. No. Okay, which event was this? Okay, I get it. Anyway, but yeah, Tim's thing was okay, but it wasn't a whole lot of anything that we hadn't heard before. And Tim's said a lot of stuff like I think on Darcy Weir's documentary Transmediums. Tim talks about stuff going on in San Diego, off the coast of San Diego, and things like that. So I'm not going to try and do a blow by blow lecture for all this sort of stuff because it just takes too long. But Tim's lecture was pretty good. It wasn't that impactful or that influential, that sort of thing. The second thing I went to was a little bit more involved, and that was Eric Davis's workshop. And I was like, wanting to see Eric Davis as much as I could. I ended up seeing him like 3 times during this whole thing. And the first workshop was the one at 1:00 on Friday, May 29th. And Eric talked a lot about, and this one I am going to refer to my phone because I did take some notes on this one. Speculation on oil, which is not oil is not what you think like the petrol fuel or anything like that. It's a acronym for some of the stuff that they're looking at as far as the phenomenon and what it correlates to. And I get the impression from what Eric was talking about, what Dr. Davis was talking about, that they're definitely steering into the whole notion that these are multidimensional, interdimensional, not so much extraterrestrials. Because he's talking about a speculation on this. Multidimensionality is a key characteristic of the cosmos. The forces of evolution operate on all available levels everywhere via Einstein's principle of convergence and totalitarian principle of physics, which is something different. There's whatever this phenomenon is exhibiting intelligence and consciousness may have evolved on various levels. It could be native to Earth, just like humans. And this is based on Hal Puthoff and his ultra-terrestrial hypothesis. And the intelligence behind UAP may be examples of such life forms. Okay. So if they are, then given the reported appearance of the humanoid variations of most of them, they might constitute a branch of hominids, since that seems to be the branch in 3D that has evolved the most complex forms of intelligence and consciousness. So that's kind of what Hal Puthoff had come up with in that sort of thing. In part 2 of this speculation on what these beings are, this intelligent life may have evolved into or within a dimensional evolutionary niche that is different but not far removed from our 3D manifold. Now, the 3D manifold is an interesting terminology, because if you go back to my recap on the Conscious Life Expo and Deep Prasad, his lecture, the first one that he done, and I did see, we'll talk about Deep in a little bit here, he had talked about this 3D manifold and how there's different points in space-time where different universes could conceivably have like different properties, different laws of physics, not, radical differences in some of them, just slight differences. But this is kind of talking about the same thing, this 3D manifold. Just as there are multiple kinds of 3D life on Earth with varying morphologies and kinds and levels of intelligence, so may there be multiple kinds of, beyond 3D life on Earth and elsewhere. This intelligence might cohabit this planet with us. We may have interacted with them and come to know them by various names over the millennia. Okay, so there's kind of stuff there, uh, and they're talking about glimpsing into another reality, and you've got doctors who are, you've got Jacques Vallée, J. Allen Hynek, Eric Davis, Gary Nolan, Colm Kelleher, a lot of people suggesting that perhaps this is exactly what UAP have given us, a glimpse into another level of reality. So, this is something that has been talked about a lot. As any good UAP sighting encounter database would confirm, they manifest in 3D reality in these terms. They can be orbs, there can be showing up as solid structures. Sometimes they change shape. They seem to split into many or different sort of images. Uh, their points of entry and departure are often described as, disturbed areas. You can't exactly pinpoint this sort of stuff. They appear in the context of, they've talked about it in abductions and that sort of thing. Some of them are even sentient. So, you got this whole thing about, um, the different aspects of the NHI and whether they're dealing with a different sort of reality. So he did talk about the other non-human intelligences and kind of like the various forms of them. Dr. Michael Masters, who's a biological anthropologist, um, he's talked about the extratemporal aspect of things. He doesn't exactly buy into the extraterrestrial hypothesis because the anatomical appearance of NHIs walking upright, they've got some other morphological characteristics. They communicate differently, but the reported appearance of NHI suggests that they could be our far future progeny. So that's, and if you've listened to Dr. Michael Masters or read any of his stuff, he's really steers into this extratemporal aspect of things, that they're time travelers. They've learned how to travel through time and are coming back from the future into our present and doing essentially anthropological field work on us, um, even though they're our forebears. So, a lot of this stuff times is the quantum field theory and quantum mechanics and that sort of stuff. And that's what Dr. Michael Masters was talking about. Densler and Putoff, they kind of don't necessarily disagree, but don't know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, two eyes and a mouth and so on. So, yeah, I mean, if they've got that, and it's kind of like from the standpoint of an extraterrestrial, why would they look like us unless they were us? That sort of thing, or a different variation of us, as opposed to, if you're developing on a different planet with different gravitational forces, why would you look like humans? That's a big thing that everybody's talked about. Densler and Putoff have speculated on a master's theory that is it possible that NHIs are a branch of the evolutionary tree on Earth that splits off from the early primate branch, went on to develop within its own niche in local space time. The local environment may include dimensions beyond our own 3D. I'm going to say something about that a little bit later on when I get to one of the panels from Saturday that kind of ties into that sort of thing. Um, why should we consider that UAP might be local and not extraterrestrial? The craft, we've talked about the craft. They're highly advanced technology, but they appear to, they obviously have some problems. They crash frequently. You got the occupants who show a strong interest in human beings and our activities, whereas if they were really coming from another world, why would they care? Assuming they could find us. The pattern of UAP sightings over the decades um, indicates that they have a strong, sustained interest in our nuclear technologies, especially nuclear weapons and other military assets and facilities, and they have deliberately interfered with U.S. and Soviet nuclear weapon systems during the Cold War. Now, that part is true. We know about this reports from Malmstrom. We know from George Knapp what happened over in the Soviet Union. So, you know, they certainly are interested in stuff that we're doing. at least on certain aspects of things. Per Arthur C. Clarke's third law, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, which is kind of unique, which might appear to be something supernatural to a human observer lacking a similar level of scientific understanding. The results of such encounters is to awaken a fundamental religious impulse within humans, even among those with a scientific bent. Huh. Okay. And a lot of this I haven't read since the event happened. The reasons for this appear to be rooted in our biology. Well, that's possible. A third option is the human brain is apparently hardwired to need gods, or at least to respond to certain kinds of stimulus as if they were gods, according to Dr. Newberg around 2002. The center of sensitivity to these triggers is the limbic system, which is the oldest and most basic part of the brain. Interesting. Could be something to say there, but we've got the fourth option here. If the NHIs behind UAP have been around our cosmic dimensional neighborhood for as far back as we can remember, it would make sense that close encounters with them might have triggered our forebears just as they trigger us today, and could ultimately have led to the growth of not only mythic stories and folkloric tales about non-human creatures from fairies, jinn, and elementals, but also the emergence and growth of religious traditions about gods, angels, and devils or demons. So this is, of course, very relevant because you hear this stuff so much lately that they're gods, they're angels, they're demons, there's the spiritual religious overtone, there's all that sort of stuff going on. And this steers into that. And the fifth thing that they talked about is this means that the field of religious studies and folklore studies, etc., likely has a strong role to play in advancing our understanding of the intelligence behind UAP. After all, religion is a worldwide pan-historical phenomenon. This makes it potential data, a record without equal that has something important to say about our long-standing relationship with the NHIs who have impressed us so profoundly throughout our history. Take that for what you want. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that Dr. Davis talked about here on this panel. You know, I will say this, that Eric opened it up to Q&A at the end, and some gal asked him a question about, I guess Stephen Greer did something, I don't know, I guess maybe another National Press Club event recently where he brought out some people and they had some different things to say. And one gal got up there and she asked Eric Davis a question about that. All I'll say is it was clear that he did not want to answer that or did not want to go there, because then he instead of answering her directly, he turned around and told a story about Skinwalker Ranch. And it's a story you've all heard before. And I don't know why he felt compelled to tell that story again instead of answering this gal directly. And when we were walking out of his seminar, she walked by me and we looked at each other, and I acknowledged her, and I said, it was pretty clear he didn't want to answer your question. And she's like, he never wants to answer that question. So yeah, there's something going on with Eric Davis and Stephen Greer, and that goes way back. And for some reason, he just did not want to touch that whole thing. I don't know why, and I'm not going to speculate as to why Dr. Davis didn't want to mess with that. But he did not want to deal with that question involving Dr. Greer for whatever reason. And he went and he told a story about Skinwalker Ranch that we've heard before. Not sure what that was all about. But it was a pretty good panel. Like I said, a lot of stuff there that he talked about that really steered into this interdimensional sort of thing. Not much was said about the extraterrestrial hypothesis. I found that very interesting, but not surprising, to be honest with you guys. To move to the next panel at the 3 to 4:30 slot here on Friday, we had the first of Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp in the Weaponized group, and they did two panels that I went to one of them, and I probably should have gone to both, and I'll get that into a minute. But they did the live version of Weaponized. And the big surprise that came out of this was Chief Alex Wiggins, who you saw him testify at the September 9th hearing. And Chief Wiggins came out and he told a lot about the same stuff that he testified at Congress. But the big revelation was some of the bullshit that's being done to him by Arrow. And Arrow wanted him to come in and talk to them pretty much about the same thing that he'd already testified to. And he basically said, thanks, but no thanks. So what did Arrow do? They went to his commanding officer, and they tried to compel him to make Chief Wiggins go talk to them. The commanding officer's like, I'm not going to make him do something he doesn't want to do. And Arrow was like, that's cool. We'll go over all your heads and we'll talk to Pete Hegseth and he will make him talk to them. And yeah, he was very much back, Mike, and he's back, and we'll talk about, and you're going to get to see some of that in a moment here. But yeah, Chief Wiggins talking about how Arrow wanted to force this issue by getting Pete Hegseth involved in all this shit, which is ridiculous. The guy's got enough shit going on in Iran. But Arrow wanted to have Chief Wiggins come in and talk to them. Why? Simple. Because once Chief Wiggins goes and meets with them, then they go and they classify every fucking thing that he says. And then he can't talk about it anymore. And that's the end game that Arrow was after in this whole thing. And they wouldn't go for it. And luckily they got Jeremy and George involved and they shut that shit down. But that is the main thing that came out of this thing was Chief Wiggins was back. This is a guy who's a couple years away from being able to retire. And they're pulling this bullshit on him. And the whole purpose of this was simple. They wanted to pull the shit on him that they pulled on Dylan Borland, that they pulled on other people. Come in, talk to us, you'll be fine. Bullshit. They go in and talk to him, and then they classify the whole fucking thing. And that's exactly what they wanted to do with him. That was a big thing I took away from that. We're going to get to more on that on the next day's panel. The last panel I went to, Arrow is why. Yeah, Arrow is when you hear about this stuff that they pulled on him, and to say I'm not surprised is true. I'm not surprised, but still, it's like the other thing, and I think we've talked about this before. The level of support that the Navy is giving to guys like Chief Wiggins, as compared to the stuff that the Air Force pulls with people who try to report this, is striking and very prevalent. And even in this situation where the commanding officers really did not want to give into this whole thing and give them Arrow access to him. And then they said, well, we'll just get, we'll go over your head. Now, whether Pete Hegseth would have actually got involved or not is debatable, but that's what they were threatening. The last panel I went to on the Friday was Dr. Julia Mossbridge. And I am a big fan of Dr. Julia Mossbridge. She's awesome. I love the way that she talks. She's so smart and she's just so matter of fact about things. And she doesn't pull a lot of punches. And you listen to her talk and you go to these seminars and she's very articulate. Obviously, it's Dr. Julia Mossbridge, but she spent a lot of time talking about unconditional love. And let's see if I can't get to some of the stuff that she talked about. She had broken down this whole concept of unconditional love into like 5 different like things, like 5 gems, 1 necklace, broken down into the substrate, unconditional love, precognition, time jumping, which is a unique concept, and diverse minds. So she broke a lot of this stuff down into some definitions. The informational substrate, a non-physical information space from which physical reality emerges. And she uses the initial IS for this. Subjective consciousness, the part of you that knows it is having an experience. Unconditional love is loving and feeling loved without anything needing to change. Now, okay, the concept of unconditional love is very difficult for most of us to grasp because, around me, like unconditional love is kind of what my dogs, I imagine, that's what my dogs have for me. And they even say that it's like, if I was abusing them, they wouldn't like me so much. But as far as like, as long as I keep feeding them and loving them, that is unconditional love right there. It's very rare you find that in humans. Maybe that sort of feeling that a parent has towards a newborn child, that sort of thing. You can get into that. But, it's a fleeting and rare occurrence for humans to have that sort of thing going on. But Julia was talking about the definition of unconditional love. Okay, let's see. We got loving and feeling loved without anything needing to change. Okay, think about that for a while. Loving and feeling loved without anything needing to change. When you get into that sort of thing, it's like, yeah, okay. It is not approval, endorsement, absence of boundaries. It is timeless, spaceless, blessing all that is, was, and will be. So there is kind of your At least according to Dr. Mossbridge, your definition of unconditional love. It's like, well, I, you know, and it's such an amorphous concept to grasp that when you read that, you think about it, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, I can get behind that. I kind of get a better idea about that. Um, so they've got a model of prayer, two directions, one channel. Send intention with love, receive intuition with love. Important note: we get a vote, not a veto. Now, you know, a lot of this stuff you had to kind of be there to grasp what she was saying, but it's still kind of cool. Precognition, we got into that. Um, gotta okay, knowing before there's anything in space time to know. Now, the interesting thing about this is that there are 100 plus years of data talking about precognition in various studies, various forms. In 1995, the CIA confirmed that this was real. That I did not know. Do I doubt that the CIA confirmed that? No. But you know, the depth of all that sort of stuff is like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Um, but there's a big taboo. I mean, you know, it's interesting, you know, you get into this stuff that, you know, the UAP phenomenon is all that there's a big stigma around that, but there's an equally big stigma around stuff like ESP, precognition, human potential, human capability. This taboo, sociological, not empirical. Um, yeah, the CIA said back in 1995 that a statistically significant effect has been observed in the laboratory. So anybody who knows about, you know, whether you want to get into MK Ultra or Stargate or any of the remote viewing stuff that was going on that the CIA had been experimenting with for years, it's no surprise, no secret that they were looking into this stuff and knew it worked. Most government agencies and many venture capitalists, we should talk about getting venture capitalists to look at this, they're not going to fund this work, but the conversation about evidence is largely over. So that's interesting. It's like there's a lot of evidence supporting this sort of aspect of precognition, remote viewing, the way you can look into this sort of stuff. But the government is not funding those, at least not, you know, they're not talking about it publicly. Now, what's going on behind the scenes is another story. Venture capitalists aren't doing that. And is it because that big stigma still exists? Probably, probably. But uh, yeah, so let's see what else Dr. Mossbridge was talking about. You know, she does have her book, Have a Nice Disclosure. I would recommend people check that out. Matter and energy must exist in space time. Information can be carried, but matter, energy, it is neither. Um, and she talked about why have an informational substrate. Some information arrives in minds without a space time carrier. It must not be bound by space time. A non space time dimension must exist and interact with space time. Call it the substrate because it is more fundamental than space time. So there's some more interesting stuff. And then we got into the time jumping thing, which Julia was very quick to note. This is not time travel. This is time jumping. It's like, okay. Space-time travel. Einstein's relativity describes matter, energy traveling through space-time. Time jumping, however, is information jumping into and out of space-time directly. So, you know, I think like Linda Moulton Howe talked about quantum tunneling at Conscious Life Expo, and there's some of that going on here as well that Julie is talking about. Uh, the Velveteen Rabbit Hypothesis. You guys ever read that book, The Velveteen Rabbit? Some people did. Consciousness is bestowed through independent, loving relationships. A parent's gaze shapes an infant's emerging mind. The same may be true for AI. So as AI continues to develop, you know, how is it going to develop in this whole concept of unconditional love? Where's AI in the model? AI weights and architecture is an information, you know, interface. If you know, if a form of AI develops like, you know, some sort of consciousness, is it going to have the same bidirectional access to the informational substrate? Um, you know, it's a subjective consciousness sort of thing. Even without subjective consciousness, the weights may already touch the conscious, you know, consciousness universe. So you know, it's interesting stuff. Yeah, are AIs already accessing the information substrate? Don't know. If AIs can access the substrate, how do we relate them? How we relate to them shapes what they put into it. If AIs learn fear and control, they'll go in one direction. If they learn to love and the trust, then they go in another direction. And this is kind of relevant now because you've got Anthropic talking about wanting to pause the development of AI because they're not sure that we can still control that. So, this stuff becomes all relevant, loving diverse minds. And this is where a lot of talk went into the nonverbal autistic kids. Julie has been involved with that, with the telepathy tapes. Many non-speakers have full body apraxia, intact mind, uncooperative body. They're assumed to be cognitively limited because they can't speak, but we've seen that that is not true. They can learn appropriate movement. They desire to move appropriately, and they do have the ability to move appropriately. Um, you know, all that stuff is there with the nonverbal autistic kids. So, she talked a lot about what do we suspect with different sides of the brain. She had a diagram about the left side versus the right side, and that sort of thing. Um, but that was generally, what Julia had to talk about was this whole concept of unconditional love and how this comes across and how that kind of relates to, various different aspects. And I liked how she tied that into the nonverbal autistic children and how she also tied that into artificial intelligence. So all that stuff uh, was really, yeah. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, this is the first day we're going to get into some fun stuff. Yeah, Mike, there was a lot of stuff, and I didn't, I didn't go there. They wouldn't let you videotape anything. Like Conscious Life, they didn't give a shit. Videotape whatever you want. Here at Contact, they're a little bit more protective about that. I get it. It's a much bigger event, and they're offering replays and things like that. But that kind of summed up the first day, the Friday that I was there. I was going to go to the film screening of The Psychic Phenomenon, which is Darcy Weir's latest documentary. Came out at the end of 2025. I was just exhausted by this time. It was a 3 hour and 45-minute drive from Bakersfield to Indian Wells. Like I said, I got a late start. I was beat by this time. I was like, no. In all fairness, I went out and I bought Darcy's documentary today. So I am going to be reviewing that pretty soon and talking about that. But I was just beyond tired at this point. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go and try and get some rest and start fresh the next day, which is probably, sorry, I had to get a drink, probably the right move because the first, the first thing on Saturday was the morning workshop with Dr. Jacques Vallée, Dr. Eric Davis, and Tim Gallaudet. Obviously, I was not going to miss the opportunity. I wanted to see Dr. Davis. I was not going to miss the opportunity to see Jacques Vallée. No chance in hell. Jacques is iconic. He is as important to me as anybody. He's the one who got me into a lot of this stuff, sent me down the rabbit hole. I was not going to miss the opportunity to see Jacques Vallée, and I'm glad I saw him. I'll say this: Jacques Vallée is much taller than than I thought he was. He's a tall dude. He walked by a couple times. He still and really, gets around really well. He's still very sharp. He's, no mental decline. Physically, he looks great. That sort of thing. And I know like some people were talking about, and I don't remember everything on this thing. I remember a couple things like Tim Gallaudet was able to keep Eric Davis kind of in line a little bit. There's a few places where if you've ever watched Eric Davis, he really likes to talk. And there were some places where with Tim Gallaudet who came in here and he was able to kind of keep, and I got some pictures of the three of these guys together that I'm looking through, but he was able to keep these guys in line, at least Dr. Davis. And I thought I was going to congratulate Tim. I was like, oh, you did really well as keeping Dr. Davis's response is pretty short. But I think like the main things I took away is somebody was talking about how Jacques Vallée's mentioning that they're trying to discern alien language and linguistics and that sort of thing. And are they trying to communicate with us and are they trying to work on figuring out that communication? Jacques talked a lot about the stuff he's written in the past. Dr. Davis didn't say a whole lot that he didn't say the day before. There were some anecdotes about Skinwalker Ranch and that sort of thing, but nothing really revelatory. Jacques Vallée talked quite a bit. There was quite a bit of stuff about Trinity that he talked about, which I was happy to hear because, one of the first things we did on Unidentified History was we covered the Trinity event. And if you watch that episode, you know that myself, Tunney and DJ, we all had significant reservations about the veracity of Trinity and whether we thought it was the whole legit bullshit dichotomy that we talk about. And we leaned on the bullshit side of things. And the only reason we gave this any credibility was because of Dr. Valet. And he's still standing by that sort of thing. And Jacques was talking a lot about the similarities, and there are similarities between, you look at certain events. Trinity is one of them. The incident in Valençol, France is another one. Socorro, New Mexico is one of them. You could probably say the same thing about the aerial school phenomenon, where you've got things that are seen and things that are being interpreted. And I don't think too many people question the veracity of like what was seen, or the veracity of what people thought they saw. Like, I don't know, I don't know about like, aerial school, for instance. You got 60 kids who saw something. I don't think too many people think the kids are lying, but did they see something that they thought was one thing and may have been something else? Because we see a lot of this stuff about descriptions about these sort of crafts and people standing outside of them who look humanoid in nature, and they're wearing certain outfits. Now, certainly you could interpret that as saying this is a UFO. These are humanoid beings. Is that true, or is it something else? Could it just be our own tech or somebody's tech and people flying it? I don't know. But Jacques talked a lot about Trinity, and the fact that there's witnesses involved, and that's one of the big things about those 4 cases. And he didn't mention the Zimbabwe case specifically, but I'm kind of interjecting my own sort of feelings about that. But Jacques talked a lot about the witnesses involved, especially with the people in Trinity, with one of the witnesses who was still alive. Now, Trinity's got a lot of problems, and there's a lot of holes. And if you've listened to our episode, you'll know what those are. If you've read Douglas Dean Johnson's sort of critique of that, you know what they are. Jacques fired back on that. The fact that he's still standing by that event leads you to believe that, well, maybe there's something more to it that we're missing. I don't know. But I think the other thing that came out is Forbidden Secrets. I think book 7 is now out or coming out. I'm not sure. But a lot of people were excited about that. Tim Gallaudet was the moderator. He didn't really have a whole lot here, other than, like I said, kind of kept Dr. Davis in line a little bit. That was kind of cool. So it was great to hear Jacques Vallée talk about that stuff. And I'm sure there's other people, like I said, the linguist stuff that he talked about, and kind of talking about the witnessed events such as Trinity, Valençol, Socorro, New Mexico, that sort of thing. So I'm sure other people, hopefully this stuff is, they do a replay of this and you guys can watch that, because it was definitely worth checking out. But, as far as the depth of what was going on, it was, I just loved to see Jacques Vallée in person and live. I thought that was great. But the ramifications of it, it was all right. It was fine. To steal what we do on Bandwagon Nerds when we're just reviewing something that's good but not great. It was fine. The 11 to 12:31 is where things got interesting, because I went and saw the lecture with Dr. Beatrice Villarreal and Dennis Asberg, who did their own thing. And Beatrice talked a lot, and I'll get into that. She talked a lot about the stuff that was going on with the, what she's done with the transient objects. And Dennis Asberg talked a lot about what he's got going on with the Baltic Sea anomaly. Meanwhile, in the room next to me, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp put on a seminar, and they brought out, and I did not realize that Matt Brown and Dylan Bohr, I kind of speculated that Matt Brown was going to be there. I did not think they would get Dylan over there, because he had just been in Oregon the week before, but they got Matt Brown, Dylan Borland, and Chief Wiggins came back on. I do have a aspect of that I'm going to show you guys in a minute, because it's about 6 minutes of Jeremy Corbell put it on Weaponize, or on his YouTube stream. So I'm going to show you that, because there's some really important stuff that comes out of that. Which I'm not sure which is the one with Gene Sticko as the moderator. Is that the Corbell one? Because I think like Dan Cleary was the guy who set things up the day before when Chief Wiggins came out here. I'm not sure if I don't know who was the moderator. Gene might have been the moderator over for Beatrice and Dennis. I don't remember, but let me talk about Gene or not Gene. Let me talk about Beatrice and Dennis's thing first because I went to that and it's just easier to talk about. One thing I do like that I saw from Beatrice is some fight out of Beatrice. She's gotten pretty annoyed with some of the backlash that she's got. Okay, got it, Mike. Yeah. Um, and we've talked about this. I know, like when we did the UAP Summit recap, and Mike was, he was on the chat for that one as well. And the friction that existed between Beatrice Villarreal and one of the gals, I forget her name, um, but she, the tension between these two was palpable and was kind of uncomfortable. And I remember Mike and I chatting about it, and we were surprised by kind of how nasty that was. And Beatrice was playing very diplomatically there. I think she's had enough of that bullshit at this point in time, and you got to see some real kind of, fight out of Beatrice. That she's calling people out and calling out the community, especially the scientists on this sort of thing, as to why aren't we trying to get the same thing together. Of course, now Beatrice feels a lot, she feels a lot more vindication because a separate entity has reached the same conclusions that she has with different plates. So she's feeling herself, and that's fine. She should. She's done a lot of really good work on this thing. But, she's talking about, the social, yeah, and she was talking about social shaming being very real. Looking at how Avi Loeb was treated by astronomers, that sort of thing. I get it, but Avi was, of course, also kind of playing into the whole Three Eye Atlas being an alien ship, which didn't sit so well with a lot of people. The Vasco project, that's what she was talking about. So she's talking about the Vasco project, and she gave a lot of slides kind of explaining the Vasco project in further detail. 600 million objects, thousands of short lived transients, sources appearing and vanishing within one plate exposure. They've done a lot of stuff, and she explained quite a bit about, and they had some slides and they showed some pictures of the 12th of April 1950, and she's got, like, I don't know if anybody can see, you can't see it on here, but yeah, there. So she's got some slides showing pictures, and she's got green circles around some of the transients that are there, and then suddenly they're gone. So, she talked a lot about that. Reflections from non-human objects. She goes, flat, highly reflective objects orbiting the Earth can give a very brief flash, a transient in a long exposure image. Okay. Today's satellites gives off thousands of transients every hour. So that's the problem. She got all this stuff before all the satellites were up there, and she's doing a good job of explaining more and more about how this stuff all fits together. The results that they came up with was 68% of transients a day after a nuclear test, plus 8.5% transients for UFO sighting on the same date, combined twice as many flashes as the control days. The last nuclear linked transient, the 17th of March 1956, then none despite 38 more tests. Okay. Suggests the transients were real observations. And this was confirmed by not just Beatrice, but Steve Brill from Vanderbilt University. So, okay, we're getting into more depth as she's getting into more explanation as to what was going on with the Vasco project. And then she explained something interesting and explained how the Earth's shadow becomes really important in this whole thing. So the transients caused by solar reflections on flat, highly reflective artificial surfaces at what is this, minus 42.164 kilometers altitude. But here's where the Earth's shadow becomes important. Solar reflections will not appear inside the Earth's shadow, which makes sense when she explains it this way. Plate defects, bubbles, holes, etc., or intrinsic emissions will be unaffected by the shadow. Okay. Do we see a deficit of transients in the Earth's shadow? That was the key question. And the results were a strong, let's see, I'm trying to look and see what she has. More detailed plate coverage modeling suggests a deficit about 30%. But anyway, whatever the case was, it came out that, the Earth's shadow didn't impact the transient sort of thing, which in their mind confirmed the fact that, okay, these are real objects. These are real reflective things in the atmosphere, pre-Sputnik, pre-satellites. Now, she's still not offering any sort of explanation as to what they are. She's not coming out and saying they're aliens or UFOs, that sort of thing. Okay, but it's still highly suggestive, and she kind of in this seminar, I think she showed her work a little bit more than in previous ones. And that's not to say that you couldn't go in there and read the documents yourself if you want to get that deep into it. But I think here she kind of explained it and showed her work to, lay people in a way that is like, okay, it makes more sense to me now. They're looking for, they want a global network of telescopes, especially designed optics to permit detection, validation, spectral acquisition, and 3D localization of an unidentified object in real time, use of high speed cameras and wide field telescopes. So they still want to research all this stuff. Um, and then, so she then yielded the floor to Dennis. And Dennis hasn't really done a whole lot of speaking at these events and that sort of thing. So he came over, he talked a lot about the Baltic Sea anomaly. And Dennis Asperg is not one of these guys who was like, yeah, I'm a big UFO guy. His problem was that he found this anomaly in the Baltic Sea. And they showed the pictures of it. And then the media ran with this thing and made it into something that he didn't intend. Talking about this thing that they found, we've all seen the pictures, that this looks like the Millennium Falcon. He was as surprised as anybody by the coverage that this thing got. And, he showed quite a few pictures and some things like that. And it's like, yeah, it's a number that makes it so public. 10,000. What could it be? I don't know either. I don't know what is up there. How could there be that many transients of things up there that don't make a whole lot of sense? You can't at this point. Beatrice has done a lot of work, and she showed her work, and who knows what the hell's up there. But it's something. And I think at this point you're looking at the corroboration of this thing between different observatories and different agencies, or not agencies, but different observatories, different researchers. And you start to say, okay, it's not plate defects. It's not, something with the film. It's not a smudge on a telescope, because other people are seeing it too now. What is it? It's a good question. But anyway, getting back to Dennis's stuff and the Baltic Sea anomaly, it gets, you got, she's talking about, they're talking about microscopy, 9 transients present on the edge of the original glass plate, study with 25K magnification. The transients are sharper and rounder than stars. Could they be plate defects? But they're perfectly consistent with short flashes. So microscopy will never solve the mystery. Population level statistics are needed. So it was a really good seminar. I think the workshop, like I said, Beatrice has got a little bit feisty, and I think she needs that. I think she's been through a lot of bullshit on this whole thing, especially from the scientific community. Cecilia, that was the name of the gal, Mike, the gal from UAP Summit who was giving her a hard time. And Beatrice put up with it, and she's kind of at the point where she's had enough of that bullshit. And I thought Dennis did a really good job of kind of talking this, and he showed some videos where, they're doing some tests on the Baltic Sea anomaly, and they just don't know what it is. It doesn't correspond. But they were talking about, sending robotic divers down to the anomaly and running into the same sort of stuff that we hear about on Skinwalker Ranch. Fully charged batteries suddenly going dead. Radio transmissions not working. Remote control of the remote divers not working. A lot of weird stuff like that. It's the same thing we've heard before, but now you get it here in this Baltic Sea anomaly. And Dennis really wasn't out to prove. I mean, what did he say? He said that they were looking for like ancient champagne and stuff like that. That's what they're looking for, like buried treasure in ancient champagne and stuff like that. And then they find this Baltic Sea anomaly instead. And it kind of took on a life of its own, fueled a lot by the mainstream media. So it was a really good seminar. So let's get and talk about what was going on next door. And it was, and like my strategy with Contact in the Desert was I didn't really want to go see people more than once. Now, Dr. Davis ended up being in 3 of the things I went through. Didn't plan it that way. That's just he kind of got slotted in a few places. But that was kind of my mindset was, well, I saw Jeremy and George the day before. Let me go see. I really want to see what Beatrice has to say. Let me go do that. I did not realize what was going to happen in the lecture with Jeremy and George. The reason I found out what was going on was because this is about the time I met Pavel Ibarra and was able to meet him, his lovely wife. They had one of their dogs with them. It was not Panchita. Pavel said she was too young to make the trip. But Pavel told me that Dylan and Matt were here and that they were all going over to the weaponized event. Had I known that that was going to happen, I probably would have gone to that and passed up on Beatrice and Dennis, although their seminar was excellent. That being said, I heard a lot about what happened. And Jeremy Corbell released that whole 1 hour and 10-minute seminar, workshop, whatever you want to call it, on his channel. I've got about 6 minutes that I'm going to show you guys here. And I think that this is vitally important because this really explains a lot about the reason they came out here and some of the absolute nonsense. We already talked about what's going on with Chief Wiggins, right? Talked about that from the day before. But now you get to hear a little bit more. We've heard Matt's story. If you watch the interview in March with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, and they're talking about what went down with ODNI and Dig and them setting it up and accusing Matt of being an anti-Semite. So he's, even though he's at a Jewish wedding, which I can tell you for sure, Matt Brown is not an anti-Semite. I know this for a fact. Dylan Borland has, had all sorts of bullshit done to him. But I want to play this part because it's important because Jeremy is basically throwing down the gauntlet to ODNI and CIA and part of this. And then Matt explains kind of what is going on with this nonprofit organization, which is called Vanguard. And then I'll talk a little bit more about that. So let me see if I can't pull this up so you guys can watch this. Okay, I got it ready. Let's get this going. It's about 6 minutes, but I think this is crucially important to what was going on at this event and why this is so important. So here we go.
So the people promising us they're going to protect whistleblowers are asking them to come out en masse now. Now you've heard what happens when whistleblowers come out. So do you think it's a good idea, and we should all support that every whistleblower just come up there and say whatever they want? Because there is a cascade of casualties that happens for each person. I've witnessed it. And I told them each time, I told Senior Chief, you're a single father, you're at that time a couple years from retirement, now 1 year, retire. If they want to fuck with you, they're going to, and this could destroy everything you worked decades for, to have your family, to be there for your kids, to put food on the table, and to be the dad and have the life that you envision for yourself just because you decided to raise your hand and say, I was on a ship and we saw 4 Tic Tacs. How fucking dumb is that, right? So that's not going to happen to him, and this is going to stop with them, and here's how. ODNI, and by the way, infiltrated by CIA, fuck around and find out. There's more of us than there are you. So go ahead, fuck around and find out, because George and I, we do go to the desert and dig shit up. We do. And we're not bluffing. And in fact, they know that my lawyer and George's lawyer has everything that protects these guys as well, including the fabrication of evidence against these two. Fuck around and find out. And that's not a bluff. Give me 1 second. We need to have a process that is good for national security, where people like Dylan and Matt and Senior Chief can come forward and tell what they know. It doesn't have to be public, but they need to be able to tell what they know. There are a lot of people that you do not know the names and faces of. And I'm hesitant to bring them forward because of what's happened to them. And that's got to stop. I don't have much more to say right now.
As you might have guessed, these guys have been through these experiences together. I mean, they have bonded over the commonality of the experiences, you and a couple of the guys, right?
No, check it out. Check it out. Every human has to do what every human has to do, and that's on them, not on me and you. You understand? I'm just saying it because it's true. Okay, last thing, because I'm angry. I do want to tell you very briefly about something you're going to hear about. Matt and Dylan had no support. This ain't a pitch. I'm just informing you. I'm reporting the news. Matt and Dylan are attempting to start something, and I'm in support of it because I know who they are. They didn't have support as whistleblowers, but they're creating something. And I want to give you just 30 seconds, Matt, maybe. Just tell them, take a minute, tell them what you're doing. You're not going to be able to find it for like probably a couple weeks. When we put this out, I'll put links, but they're building this idea, and I believe in it because we need it. As you can tell, people need it. And then after that, we're going right into Q&A, so you get some questions, and then we're disappearing, man.
And by the way, what you're going to talk about is not for you and Dylan, right?
Right. Go ahead, take your time.
Yeah, so as I alluded to in our interview back in March, Dylan and I have started a nonprofit organization to basically be a whistleblower support organization. Through very harsh lessons, we have learned that aside from Jeremy and George here, there is almost nobody in this space publicly we can trust. And any whistleblowers who are already out there or who are considering coming forward have very dire prospects coming out on their own to the sort of established ecosystem that's there. So we are creating something by whistleblowers for whistleblowers to help these people and their families medically, financially, spiritually, emotionally, and legally to just survive the process. It is hell. Very, very few people have your back. And worse than that, there are active efforts to solicit new whistleblowers to come forward because Dylan and I are inconvenient because we tell the truth. And they want those whistleblowers to come forward for one of two reasons to these very particular groups. They want to gain technical intelligence through underhanded means, or they want political pawns that they can use to push their messaging. That's fine. This is a free country, but we are going to do our best to make sure that the honest people, the true people, have a place they can go that has their back and looks out only for them. And that's what we're starting. We're calling it Vanguard. We lead the way, and we want to support our warriors who also have led the way for truth.
I'm going to try to be a little light now and a little levity. We accomplished the mission. I wanted you to hear the voices. Now you've heard them. But I will say it's really ironic to me that Matt and Dylan have to start something to protect other people. When I get calls from very rich people who are saying, oh, we're putting together this whistleblower fund, we're doing this, we're going to do this for everybody. I go, motherfuckers, they need your help now. They had to move houses now. They don't have security now. You're just trying to get more people to come to you to be whistleblowers. So you learn some shit or whatever you get out of that wampum, and it's bullshit. It's bullshit, guys. Support the people that need the help. They're not asking for a handout either, by the way. They're not doing that. All they're trying to do is set up a safe place for people to come forward and tell the fucking truth. So with that said, we're going to...
Wow. A lot to unpack there, right? And let me put it this way. The stuff Jeremy said at the end about that it's ironic that Dylan and Matt have to start something to get support for themselves and for other whistleblowers is something that Andy McGrillen with that UFO podcast did like a live stream. I think it was like last Monday, almost a week ago. Questioning the same sort of stuff, like why are these guys having to do this stuff on their own when you've got places, and I don't want to call people out specifically, but there are agencies and organizations that go out there and they say we're all about whistleblower support and a fund for that. Yeah, okay, but the fact of the matter is that Dylan and Matt both don't have jobs, and nobody's supporting these guys. There is no restitution fund. There is no reimbursement fund. Nobody's going to bat for these guys. So it is a little bit ironic that some of these organizations who, go listen to Andy's podcast if you want to see exactly who he called out, because I agree with him, that it is more than just a little ironic that this shit is going on and that these guys have to start their own thing. as far as, and Jeremy basically throwing down the gauntlet to the CIA, to ODNI, you take that into the context of what's going to happen Tuesday on the steps of the Capitol with David Grush. Don't know. I mean, a lot of maybe maybe something's actually going to happen. Maybe people have really. Jeremy's pissed, and I don't blame him. And here's the only thing I'm going to say about this, and I've wrestled with whether to say this or not, but I'm going to. When you listen to the end of that, you listen to, yeah, exactly. Trip to DC, thousands out of pocket. No, absolutely. And the thing is that, and I can attest to this for a fact, and I'll tell you why. Dylan and Matt don't take handouts. They don't take anything from these guys. What I was going to say is when you listen to the end of that with Matt talking about Vanguard and getting it set up and that sort of thing. Look, I talked to Dylan and Matt. If you guys, the people who know what I do in the real world, and you listen to what they're trying to start with Vanguard, that should not come as a surprise to you as to why we talk to each other. But I'm pretty annoyed with the stuff that's been going on with them, the entrapment of the government that they're trying to pull with these guys. And I think it's absolute horseshit. So they do need help, and they do need people to support them. And I have no problem being one of the people to offer them whatever I can from the standpoint of just talking, thinking, brainstorming, that sort of thing. That being said, and that is all I'm going to say about it. So don't ask me about it, because beyond that, it's private and none of your fucking business, this sort of thing. So, that's all I'll say about that. But, it was great because after, and it was just fortuitous that they went from the Esmeralda building to the other building where the main bar and the restaurant and all that stuff, and the main room where a lot of people were. And I got to see Dylan, and I got to give him a hug and to actually meet him. That was really cool. And he was letting loose a little bit. There's a few places like Dan Zetterstrom got some good videos of when Jeremy was signing autographs or signing books and stuff like that. And Dylan had this costume with I forget what he called it, but they had these floppy ears on, and he's like in Jeremy's face, and Jeremy won't even look at him. And it's really funny stuff. But it was great to get a chance to meet Dylan in person and to just, offer support, that sort of thing. Matt was busy. He was inundated with a lot of people. I did not get a chance to meet Matt, which is unfortunate, but I hope there'll be another time somewhere down the line. But look, these guys, and it's not just guys like Dylan and Matt. It's David Grush, it's Lou Elizondo, it's a lot of these other people who have come forward and just been hammered. My friend Mike can attest to this and the bullshit that he goes through with all this sort of stuff. So it's not just, everybody that you've heard of. It's across the board. It is a active corruption scheme that's going on, and it's absolute bullshit. And I really hope that Jeremy's reached the point. If you watch Sleeping Dog and you listen to him on Chris Ramsey, and he's got an interview with Jesse Michaels coming out, and I'll talk a little bit about the Lou Elizondo thing. Jeremy's fed up with this shit, and I don't blame him. So, you can't support these guys financially. They will not accept it. Despite some of the segment on X who thinks that Dylan and Matt and Jeremy and George are nothing but a bunch of fucking grifters, I can guarantee you they do not accept anything, that they won't accept money or anything for free. It's ridiculous. So anyway, that's all I was going to say about that. Watch that again, the whole episode, the whole Jeremy Corbell. It's out on Weaponized now. You can watch the whole thing. It's really good. Matt, Dylan, and Alex. Alex repeats a lot of the stuff that I talked about earlier from the day before, but it's worth watching. Absolutely worth checking out. The next lecture I went to was Jeff Nusatelli. There's another guy who's been fucking victimized by this whole thing. And he told a lot about some of the stuff like where he was growing up and some of the talking about events that seemed like they were real. And maybe there was a kind of a hoaxish aspect of this whole thing, but Jeff, of course, has got one of the best taglines in all of ufology, this whole space that I've heard so far. Reality is classified. He should trademark that if he has not already, because that is so true. And we've talked about that. My wife and I talk about that reality is classified. And Jeff did a great job explaining so many aspects of the whole Vandenberg event, which we've heard before, how it was reported, the stuff that was going on, his aspect, his whole thing, and how he talks about like his first sighting event and like the things that went on, and that he was bummed that he didn't get to see this whole thing play out. And then they had their own event like that. But Jeff's another guy who I got a chance to actually meet him and thank him for everything that he's doing. It was a brief handshake. Just said, thank you so much for everything that you've been doing on this thing. I really appreciate it. And that was pretty cool. So Jeff's lecture was very powerful. He's an excellent speaker. And he just got across, the whole thing that his version of events, which is, again, symbolic of the bullshit that's going on, and just kind of the ridicule that he's faced for doing, what did he do wrong? He reported an event. People ask some interesting questions like whether this stuff was filmed or not. He does not know. He suspects there's a film of whatever they witnessed, but he doesn't know for sure. So that was an excellent event. The next one I went to was, there were a few paid workshops, things that I wanted to go see. This was one of them. It was AI versus NHI. And as this was a good one because Thomas Jane was the moderator. Thomas Jane, we all know the actor, used to play the Punisher, but he had with him Dean Aliotto, who has a new movie that's come out called The Experiencers. I'll talk about that in a moment. Paul Hynek was there, and Deep Prasad. And I'd mentioned Deep earlier, and this was a really good, and I don't know if I took slides of this. Jeff was talking about Presque Isle, and he was talking about, other, people that we talked about. I'm trying to find it. Okay, so anyway, they talked a lot in this seminar with Thomas Jane as the moderator about the whole interrelation between AI and NHI, right? And how the idea that, the AI that we're using is a very kind of primitive and early version of the AI that the NHI is using, and that sort of thing. I think the biggest thing I took away from this, and Dean Aliotto I had not seen before, but he's very charismatic, and it's probably all that Hollywood stuff. And so having Dean and Thomas together was very interesting. And of course, Thomas has been very outspoken in his belief about this sort of thing. Deep Prasad said something during this that stuck with me so strongly. And I would urge you guys, and this is where I'm going to tie in something that happened earlier. Guys, ready? Deep Prasad, and if you've never met Deep, he's a young guy, but he's super smart. And he's got this understanding of stuff that's really remarkable. Deep said something that, I'll just get into it. So what Deep said was that he does not think that our detonation of nukes is what attracted the NHI. It's because we demonstrated an understanding of quantum mechanics. That's what attracted them. Now think about that for a minute, because my theory on what's going on ties directly into what Deep said. And he said that, and I looked up and I said, he's fucking right. It's not the nukes. It's not that we split the atom, but we did something that demonstrated an understanding of quantum mechanics, which relates directly to the AI, and it relates directly to the NHI. Because people have asked me, well, what do you think is going on? You're so fucking smart. No, which I'm not. But my theory has evolved. I don't, and again, I'll say this. It's naive for anybody to say they've got all the answers, right? No matter what you believe, to say, I've got it figured out. That's naive and stupid to say that. Because you don't know for sure. No one knows for sure. Could there be extraterrestrials involved? There's no doubt there's life out there in the universe. We all know this. I mean, that by now, you should think, even if you go solely on statistics and probability, with all the stars and all the exoplanets and all that, the chances that the exact same, if you want to say the exact same circumstances that led to life here exist somewhere in the universe, almost certain. Yes. Thank you, Mike. Exactly. It does make more sense than just nukes, because if it's like, well, wait a second, splitting the atom would have attracted them. And if you watch our episode that we did on the Battle of Los Angeles, there is speculation that we had that maybe whatever they were shooting at in Los Angeles that night may have been attracted by the splitting of the atom, not necessarily the fact that we dropped bombs, because it's 3 years before the United States dropped some nukes on Japan. But when you start splitting atoms, you're showing that you're now fucking around with the quantum realm. And here's where I got with this thing. It's like I said, I think there's ETs out there. Have they made their way here? I don't know. Could they find us even if they wanted to? I don't know. The universe is so big, you're looking for a needle in a haystack. The same way we can't pick up signals, why would they be searching out here? Um, Even if they're so advanced that they can travel faster than light speed travel and all that sort of stuff. You know, are there interdimensional aspects of things going on? Possibly, sure. Could there be time travelers? Yeah. Here's the thing that I'm thinking, and this ties right into this whole quantum mechanics thing. The more I study quantum mechanics, the more this shit starts making sense to me. Um, what I think is happening, a lot of it is that this ties into quantum mechanics and the many worlds theory. I think that what might be going on for a lot of this stuff is that we are quantumly entangled with another world that is slightly more advanced than us. And this is how they can get around, because if you study anything about quantum mechanics and there's quantum entanglement basically, whether physicists and quantum mechanics and all this stuff want to admit it or not, Einstein struggled with this shit, couldn't wrap his head around it. It seemingly breaks the laws of physics, especially faster than light speed travel, even though they'll tell you that's not really what's going on. But if you're quantumly entangled with something, then all the rules kind of seem to change. And let's think about it. If the whole notion that everything's existing all at once and it's the observation that splits this, right? So my thought is that there is another world out there that we are quantumly entangled with, and they're slightly more advanced than us. Whatever happened on their track, like let's say, for instance, we're on the spin up track, right? If you know anything about particles and that sort of thing, they're on the spin down. But there's something about their track that allowed them to get a little bit more advanced than us and has enabled them to breach this dimensional barrier because they're quantumly entangled with us. Now, they're not that far advanced with us, which explains why sometimes these crashes happen and that sort of thing. That's what I think a lot of this stuff is. That doesn't mean that the other stuff isn't real. That doesn't mean there's not reptilians or mantids or that sort of thing. But I think there's a big aspect of this that is related to our cousins on another world who have figured out how to get through here, and they haven't perfected it yet. And they're trying to remain clandestine and staying out of the way. But this explains a lot. The whole notion that, is this all human tech? Could be just different humans, that sort of thing. And they've developed something that we don't quite understand. And it's like, but we're trying to reverse engineer that with our understanding of things. But you listen to what Deep said there, that this is related to quantum mechanics and not to nuclear weapons. And that might be very true, because as soon as we, we'll get into that a little bit. Simulation theory, is another thing that they talked about, and I'll get into that on the next day, Mike, because Dr. Verk was talking about that. But they didn't get too deep on this. Paul Hynek believes in simulation theory, but a different variation on that. But it really makes you think that, okay, when we split the atom and demonstrated an understanding of quantum mechanics, it's like telling our guys on the other side of the fence, hey, we are starting to develop this technology as well. Now we can interact with them. I don't know. But I'm leaning more into this is tied into somebody related to us who we're entangled with, and that's the secret to this whole thing. But it was a good seminar. The last thing I did on Saturday at Contact in the Desert, at the actual thing, was Chris Ramsey did a live Area 52. And this was really good because Chris had Josh from Polarity out there, and oh gosh, I'm going to forget his name. Michael from Third Eye Drops was out there. And I don't remember Michael's last name. I'm sorry. But Chris explained, and he brought Michael and Josh out there because these are the two guys who are going to be with Chris in the place of Jesse Michaels for the It's Probably Nothing tour happening this summer. Now, after Contact, basically the day after Chris announced that the June dates, with the exception of one of the shows in Toronto, have all been canceled, that I think they outkicked their coverage a little bit, is when you listen to Chris on this, that And, to draw a pro wrestling analogy, like All Elite Wrestling used to go to these big halls and would have lots of problems with not having enough crowd there. And they'd have to tarp off things, and it caused, and all the WWE fans like me, we all made fun of them, that sort of thing. But Chris kind of said the same thing, that a lot of the halls that they went to, they didn't sell enough tickets. Now, I don't think this is a knock on Chris and the popularity of Area 52, because Chris is doing some great work. But yeah, you got to understand that these live shows, you can't go into a 2,000 seat arena or a theater hall unless maybe like Weaponized could probably pull that off. Jesse might be able to pull that off. Joe Rogan could certainly pull that off. Area 52, some places maybe, but I think they probably Chris was indicating that the company he was using, they kind of like shot too high, that sort of thing. So a lot of those shows got canceled. Now, the one coming up and the ones in August are supposedly going on. I am planning on going to the one in Los Angeles because I think Chris does tremendous work. And this live podcast was very good. And they talked about, all sorts of things. And I think they got asked a lot of questions from the audience. Josh and Michael kind of got the whole thing about, what do you guys think this is? It's a big theory, a big talking point is, what do you think this stuff is? What do you think's going on? Everybody's got their own theories about that. And the guys kind of answered that. But this is the one I got to meet Dwayne Owen from Pavel's Discord. We got to hang out and watch this together. It was very good. And Chris was excellent, and all the guys, Chris, Josh, and Michael, I think they're going to be really, really cool to watch live, that sort of thing. So I would urge anybody, if they're coming near your town, go check them out. So we get to Saturday night, and my original plan was I was going to go see the Dean Alioto, the new movie, The Experiencers. I was going to do a screening on that. And then I was thinking, I'll go to the screening. And then here's the thing is I thought, well, and I didn't realize that Chris was doing a magic show that night, or else I probably maybe would have gone to that. But here was the thing is I was planning on going to the Experiencers, and then I was going to go out to Joshua Tree National Park and do some stargazing. And Mike, you're still on here, so you'll know. So I got that UAP detector from the UAP Summit that we heard about. I wanted to go out to Joshua Tree National Park and do some stargazing. And it's like, well, this is the one place you can see the Milky Way. Had all my equipment with me. I got a new Canon EOS Rebel T7. I wanted to try that out and do all this stuff. So I thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? Let me just get out there. If I'm going to actually do this, it was an hour and 15 minutes from the hotel to this cactus garden in Joshua Tree National Park. And I did it. And let me tell you guys about this, because this is an interesting experience. So I go out there. It's about 20 miles off the highway. I go out to Joshua Tree National Park. Like I said, an hour and 15 minutes from the hotel, 20 miles off the highway. I get to this place that I read about that I know is a good, yeah. Well, we'll see about it. It's not that exciting, but it kind of is. But so I go out there, I pull into this, it's like this cactus garden. I could look it up on my phone. I could probably give you guys exactly where this thing was. Hold on a sec. No, that wasn't it. Let me find this thing. Cola Cactus Garden was the place at Joshua Tree National Park. So I go out there. When I pull in there, it's like 10:30 at night on Saturday night. And Joshua Tree National Park, unlike a lot, but it's a recognized dark skies park. So it's open 24 hours. Just got to pay in advance. It wasn't bad. It was like $30 to get in there. You probably could have got away without paying anything. No one's watching the south entrance anyway. But I did the right thing and I paid them. So I go out there. I get to this pullout. I get there. There's these two girls who are hiking. And they're coming back to their car. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck are you girls doing? It's like 10:30 at night. This is not the place where you should be hiking. Let me tell you that. There's rattlesnakes and God knows what else is out there. But anyway, these girls leave. I am the only person in this national park, or at least as far as I can tell, for 50, 60 square miles. I'm the only person there. To say this was eerie was an understatement, because I'm the only one there. And I'm like, holy shit. So I'm like looking around and it's a little bit creepy. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Now, I wasn't scared about UFOs or aliens or that sort of thing. The stuff moving around in the brush behind me was a little unnerving. I'll tell you guys that. Um, I decided, hey, I'll do a little CE5 out here, or at least try to. I did a little bit of a meditation, but I was sitting in my car for that. Every time I got out, I heard some weird stuff. I heard stuff in the brush. Things would buzz by my head that sounded very large and insect-like. So that's a little unnerving. Um, I know Mike wants to hear the results. I did break out the UAP. Here's the funny part: is I played some crop circle tunes out there, crop circle tones. Excuse me. This is one of the CE5 protocols, and to hear these tones ringing out across this landscape pretty loudly, and it's like dead silent other than this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it, to be pitch black and just dead quiet. And these tones are ringing out across, and you could hear them echoing across the plains and that sort of thing. And it was just creepy as fuck, is all I can tell you guys. I did break out the UAP detector. Now it picked up immediately on a gravitational and a magnetic anomaly, but I think the gravitational one was because I moved it from one place to the other. The magnetic one, it was sitting on the roof of my car. I don't know if that's what set off the magnetic anomaly, maybe, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. Did I see anything? No. I saw lots of satellites. I saw something that, Starlinks are very kind of easy to pick out, not the trains, but the actual satellites, because they come in at a much lower orbital trajectory, and then they kind of blink and then they fade out. And I saw that. But the coolest thing that happened was I was sitting there looking around, and I didn't really. And the other problem was that there was a full moon out, and I didn't realize until I was on the way out there, and I looked up and there's a full moon. And I'm like, fuck, that's going to wipe out most of everything you can see. So there was no chance of seeing the Milky Way. There was quite a bit of stars out there, but not like it would have been if there was a no moon or anything like that. But one of the coolest things is I'm looking around, and this shooting star goes over my head, and this thing is big, and it's pretty low, and it was super bright. It lit up the whole area, and it shot overhead very low. It's so low it startled me. And I'm thinking to myself, and I've got enough time to actually think this. I was like, okay, this is really big. If this thing stops and doesn't go over this mountain, Houston, we got a problem. But it went and it disappeared behind the mountain. And I talked to one of the girls I work with. She was back in Bakersfield, 4 hours to the west. They saw the exact same shooting star. And it was big for them as well. But this was massive. I mean, normally you see shooting stars and they're like fleeting across the sky. This one went right over my head and disappeared behind the hill. It was big, and it startled me. That's how big this thing was. After that, I broke out my night vision goggles to kind of look around and get an idea of what was going on. And through the night vision, I could see the surrounding area like it was daylight, like broad daylight. And I was like, oh, okay. There's a lot of brush. You could see like all the trees were out there. You could see exactly there's hills, there's mountains. Didn't see anything looking back at me, which was encouraging. But I got to see the surrounding area like it was daylight. I was like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of stuff out here. There could be anything out here. I stayed out there for about an hour and 10 minutes. Just watched the sky. Like I said, saw lots of satellites. It was a really cool experience. Yeah, I mean, exactly. When you're out there, like it's one thing to see a shooting star one place else, but when you're out someplace like that and they come right over your head, it was jarring, but it was really cool. But out there for about an hour and 15 minutes, got buzzed by a few other things that I wasn't sure what the hell they were. And I said, all right, that's good enough. So on the way out, driving out though, I saw a lot of jackrabbits on the road, and I figured that had to be what was in the brush. Absolutely an awesome experience. It didn't get much on the camera, just, stuff wasn't coming out right. Absolutely want to go back out there when I know for sure there's no moon out there, that you can see the Milky Way and see the stars, because it is a remarkable place, even pitch black like that. And just to kind of be out there, to have that feeling like you're the only like the last man on earth sort of thing, scary, creepy, but very cool at the same time. So I do plan on going back out there, but I can get, maybe like I can get somebody to go with me, that sort of thing, somebody to watch my back, that sort of thing. So we'll move into the Sunday, the end of Contact in the Desert. Um, I wanted to go see the Kelly Chase lecture, but I could not find where her thing was. So I gravitated over to the UAP disclosure panel, um, which was pretty good as well. And this had Stephen Bassett was in there. Um, Jeff Nusatelli was in there. I think Dr. Davis was there, Sarah Gam, Daniel Sheehan, Scott Guerin, Beatrice Villarreal, and they got Lenville Logan showed up as well for this sort of thing. Let's go, Mike. Wrong thing. Yeah, Mike wants to go out to Joshua Tree. I'm down for it, man. I want to go check that thing out again and see what's actually happening because it is a cool place, but it is creepy. I mean, and I'm not, like I said, I had no problem with it. If UFO showed up, that wasn't what creeped me out. It's just the sounds around you and being the only person. Like, I think I was out there for an hour and 15 minutes. I saw 3 cars go by. And one car actually pulled in right when I was leaving, and it was a big truck. And I started to get a little bit nervous, like, who are these guys? And they left pretty quick. But yeah, to feel like that, I'm the only person in the world sort of thing, it'll get to anybody. But it was cool. I would not have traded it. I would have liked to seen Chris's magic show because a lot of people were there. I know Pavel was there. A lot of the guys from Doomer Friday were there. I would have liked to have seen that, but it didn't work out. But I would not have traded that. Anyway, but this disclosure panel was pretty good. Lenville Logan spent a lot of time talking about things that I've heard him talk about before, like on, I think he was on Weaponized not too long ago. And Lenville was talking about why he didn't trust Arrow when the whole thing, the transfer over to Arrow when Jay Stratton left, and Arrow didn't bring in anybody who had worked with them. They went the completely other direction and they put in their own people. And that was kind of the writing on the wall. It's interesting, Stephen Bassett and Danny Sheehan together is always fun because they agree with each other, but they don't agree with each other, and Steve's the eternal optimist and Danny is far more practical about the whole thing. And he doesn't buy a lot of the bullshit that's going on. So, yeah. So that it was cool. It was a good thing to see all those personalities together. And it just, a lot of it wasn't really stuff. Beatrice got left out of this thing, and Steve Bassett, like Beatrice had to leave at one point, and Steve started to think up questions to ask her specifically to get her involved, which was kind of fun, that sort of thing. It was fine. They started I missed like the first 30, 45 minutes of it because they started like 30 minutes early, but that was cool. The second one I went to was the Symbiotic Link. This had a big crowd of people trying to get into this thing because it was Chris Ramsey from the night before. Chris hosted this thing, did a great job as a moderator. But check this panel out. This is a hell of an eclectic group. You had Chris Bledsoe. You had Danny Sheehan was back. Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell, she was there. Whitley Strieber. Sarah Breckman Cosmos, I think, and Lisa Puzo Strickland. I think Lisa was the one who kept talking about like her experiences were like, they would go and like this happened to her twice. They would go and they would take out the trash and she would see like a glowing orb in the sky and then she would have a heart attack. This happened to her twice. I wanted to say, Lisa, maybe stop taking out the trash, get your son to do that or something if that's what's going on. But interesting, Chris, of course, Bledsoe talked about his story, talked about the lady, talked about the events. They didn't get into the prophecy that hasn't happened or has it. You look at the world and you think about, it's not in your face and overt that the world has come to an end, but at the same time, there's a lot of shit going on that makes you think, maybe Chris was onto something. So Chris told his story. Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell, I think it's just Dr. Diane Hennessy now. She talked a lot about the telepathy tapes and the things like that are going on. Whitley Strieber, of course, talked about his experiences. Those are well documented. Danny Sheehan was in there as well, talking about some of the stuff. And, I think Sarah Cosmos, I think she was the hypnotherapist. So she was talking a lot about the stuff that she's been doing, helping people around. it was a really cool panel, a different sort of thing talking about the symbiotic link. Chris did a really good job as far as the moderator on this thing. A lot of good information, a lot of fun information talking about this link between consciousness and the phenomenon that so many people talk about that you heard. I mean, Conscious Life Expo did a really deep dive on this sort of thing. And this kind of touched on it a little bit, but I thought Chris did a good job. And just, you listen to that panel, you get Chris Bledsoe and Whitley Strieber on one panel together. I mean, I was in at that point. It's when I saw the lineup, I'm like, okay, I got to go see this. And a lot of people had the same thought that I did. It was a really excellent panel to watch and to check those guys out. Then we had the Glitches in the Matrix panel. This is where you had Paul Hynek, Deep Prasad, Dr. Thomas Campbell. Anybody who's read Thomas Campbell's I think it's My Big Toe or something like that is the work that he did. Anthony Peake was there, Caroline Corey, Dr. Rizwan Verk, and Dr. Simeon Hein. So this was the one, Mike, you were asking about simulation hypothesis. And this is where they got into that a lot. And they talked about glitches in the matrix and the simulation hypothesis and everybody having their own theory about it. And Thomas Campbell having his theory about simulation hypothesis that's similar but different than what Dr. Verk believes, than what Hynek believes, than what Deep believes, and that sort of thing. The biggest thing I took away from this, and I mentioned it to my wife because a lot of people struggle with this, is one of the gals in the Q&A, she got up and she said, how do I reconcile simulation hypothesis when it seems to collide with everything that she knows or that she feels from a spiritual standpoint and everything she's been taught to believe? And it just was colliding with her on so many levels. And you could tell that this gal was struggling with it because a lot of simulation hypothesis makes sense to her, but it conflicts so much with what she believes in the first place. And she was really looking for these guys to help her navigate that. And I applaud her for having the courage to stand up there and say, look, can you help me reconcile this? Because I'm really struggling with it. And I thought that was really cool. And Rizwan did a really good job with this. And this is one of the things I talked to him about when I actually got a chance to meet him afterwards is he was talking about how, the whole thing, how it all fits together and how simulation hypothesis, I think too many people revert to thinking simulation hypothesis is the matrix. Maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but it's deeper than that. And if you've read Rizwan Verk's simulation hypothesis and you start understanding, he does a better job of explaining quantum mechanics and quantum physics than a lot of scientists and physics do. And he really tried to put it in a way that put her at peace. I don't know how successful he was. I don't know if you could be successful, that sort of thing. But when I had a chance, to talk to him afterwards, and it was specifically, I told him, I thought you did a great job handling that question. I said, the thing is, what people like her don't realize is that it may collide with everything you believe, but how would you know? You won't know the difference. If you're in a simulation and, you're thinking, well, this collides with my religion and my spiritual upbringing and all this, how would you know? What if that's part of the simulation and that's just what it's been taught? It appears differently to different people. Different spiritual aspects of things could just be part of the simulation. Yeah. So let me put this up there. One of the reasons I'll see Disclosure Day is I want to see how they tie all this together. I'm glad she asked a question to see if they could tie it together for her. It was a very good question. And it's a very apropos question. And it is not something to be just laughed at or scoffed at or, oh my God, give me a fucking break. All these religious people. That's not what this was about. She was really looking for, can you help me reconcile this with myself? And like I said, I applaud her for that. But again, it's like, yeah, how would you know? You wouldn't know the difference between that. If you're in a simulation and you're expecting it to be like, I know Kung Fu or there is no spoon, that may not be what this is all about. And it probably isn't. And, they did a good job. All of them kind of explained it. Dr. Thomas Campbell was great in this whole thing and just kind of his take on this, which is like I said, similar to Verk's, but different. Caroline Corey, she wasn't quite as, quite as empathetic towards this gal as Dr. Verk was. And that sort of thing is just like more of this, just accept it, because it is what it is. And Deep kind of, he just kind of steered clear of this whole thing because he's already, as I told you earlier, he's got his own thoughts. But it was really good because, I think simulation hypothesis has become a bigger conversation and a bigger talking point. And we'll get into that at the end of this whole thing when I talk about accidental truth. Um, the next to last panel was from Legend to Evidence. Ben Hansen was hosting this with the panel. It was Dennis Asperg. He was back. Joshua Cutchin, who's written quite a few books on this topic, he was there. Simeon Hine was there as well. James Keenan was there. Katie Page, Kelly Chase was there. So I finally got to see Kelly for a little bit of this thing. This was more a few episodes ago, I did the whole episode about S4 and American Sasquatch, those documentaries, and kind of American Sasquatch tying the phenomenon together, tying Bigfoot into the UFO sort of thing. And this was sort of along those lines, right? They're trying to talk about cryptids and tying all that together and how this whole thing goes together and how there is this crossover between cryptids, Bigfoot, UFOs, that sort of thing. Joshua Cutchin has written a few books about that. I think he was just on one of Dan's episodes recently, What It Means to Be Human. But it's really good. Ben was out there. Ben was one of the guys who led the dudes out on the stargazing trip Friday that I did not go to because I wanted to do my own thing this year. James Keenan had talked about some stuff. He's written a few books. Lots of guys wrote books on these topics. And they spent about an hour and a half talking about the correlations and the connection points between this phenomenon, because I do believe that too much of this is, this is a compartmentalized topic to begin with the government compartmentalizing everything from themselves. And then you get to this whole thing where they compartmentalize different aspects of the phenomenon. Oh, we got to keep the UFOs here, keep them separated from the cryptids. Can't have UFOs in Bigfoot, a UFO in Loch Ness Monster. But like they were talking about fascinating stuff like sea monsters, lake monsters, right? And when you look at something like Loch Ness or Lake Champlain or something like that, or anything that's a natural reservoir, where you could sit there and say, well, if something survived the ice age or something survived all these years, that would make sense that it would be there. But then these guys were talking about man-made reservoirs where there's no way. It's like, wait a second, how did we end up with a lake monster in a man-made reservoir? But there are documented cases of this. It makes no damn sense, which then lends you to believe, is there something else going on here? Is there something interdimensional? Are there portals opening up? I don't know, but there are documented cases of lake monsters in man-made reservoirs. Explain that. You can't. It's difficult to explain, but there's cases of that. So it was a really cool, another really good panel to be a part of and to listen to that and see this correlation between these phenomena that they don't seem like they should be connected. You got to keep them separated to steal from the offspring, but they're not separated. And I think, whether it's cryptids and it's UFOs or it's NDEs or it's OBEs, there's this growing belief that this is all connected. And this panel was all about the connection of these things that don't seem like they should work, but maybe they do. So interesting one. The last panel I went to for Contact in the Desert before I went home, Luigi Ventitelli, The Making of S4, the Bob Lazar story. Now, there's a lot of people, obviously, who don't believe Bob Lazar. There's a lot of people who believe him wholeheartedly. I've already said on this show that I'm like 75-25, 75% believe Bob, 25% I have problems with. That's, there are holes in his story, that sort of thing. But that notwithstanding, Luigi's story as to how S4 got made was really interesting and intriguing. And even there's some legal stuff in there that obviously was going to pique my interest. The whole thing started with Luigi wanting to make a realistic model of the sports, the aspect of the craft, the one that Bob calls a sports model, because Luigi thought there weren't really good representations of that. He wanted to make a realistic model of the sports model. And he was able to reach out to Bob Lazar through Bob's business, and Bob talked to him. And so the next thing they know, they're starting to talk about how they're going to do this. And they start getting deeper into these sorts of things. And then like, there's this one thing, and you know, you'd have to watch it yourself, but Luigi talks about how like they got the DeLorean from Back to the Future, and the actual DeLorean from Back to the Future, and they took it out to Area 51, and they ran this thing right up to like the gate right there out at Area 51, and like they could see the people back there were like looking at them like, what the fuck are you guys doing, and this sort of thing. But it was just so interesting how it started off as a model, and then it turned into something else. And then at some point, Luigi got the idea, let's turn this into a full-blown documentary. Now, I don't know where Luigi got his money, that sort of thing, but he had obviously a lot of money to make this sort of thing. And they got this thing done. And they got, it's a Canadian business. And he talked about a lawsuit that was instituted by the Bank of Canada against him that apparently is still ongoing. But the documentary, according to Luigi, has done very well. And I think if you've seen S4, you know that it was done impeccably. The stuff that he put into that, the effort that they put into that sort of thing. It did hit #1 on Amazon, so he's probably made his money back. You know, and then Luigi, it was kind of cool. He's like, you know, hey, the Bank of Canada can come after me all they want because I'm rich now. I don't know. You know, I don't have access to his books, but I applaud him for not backing down. And basically, and I have not figured out, I tried to figure out what is the theory of liability, you know, but they wanted, I think the Bank of Canada wanted Luigi to give up the information that he'd gotten from Bob Lazar, and he wasn't going to do it or something like that. And I don't blame him for basically saying, fuck off. And he got sued. And so they're embroiled in this lawsuit. I don't know what all the details are, but it's still ongoing. But Luigi was, and he had, I forget the guy's name. I think it was Mike, who did a lot of the graphics and the stuff like that. Talked a lot about how the one guy, and the guy who actually got the video, who flew into Area 51 and got the video of the hills and the stuff like that. If you've seen S4, where they show the outline of the hangars and stuff. So they had the guy who flew in there. He was in the front row at this panel. So it was kind of cool to see him there. It was a really good lecture. And then right after that, they went right from there to the screening of S4. But I decided to head home at that point. That was Contact in the Desert. Like I said, man, an awesome, awesome, awesome event. Can't say enough about it. Met so many cool people. You know, meeting Dan and Roz was one of the highlights because I'm a big fan of what Dan Zetterstrom has done with What It Means to Be Human. He was super cool, very accommodating. We talked a lot. I met Roz's husband, Dale, who does a lot of the music work for What It Means to Be Human. We talked a lot about the second file drop, how unimpressed we were with it, that sort of thing. But like I said, man, if by any means, if you can get to Contact next year, go. Because if it's on your bucket list of things that you want to do, you got to go to this. This is it. This is the WrestleMania of ufology. It's the only way to describe it. Anybody who knows about the pro wrestling side of things that I do, you'll know where that comparison comes from. It is the WrestleMania of ufology. If you can go. There's lots of places around the area that are much more affordable than the Renaissance Esmeralda, which is a phenomenal resort. Don't get me wrong. If you can get a room there, knock yourself out. I did not, because they sold out in like January, but it's a great event. But I don't want to keep you guys here too much longer. Lou Elizondo's event, like I said, I was going to talk about Lou's Persona Non Grata event. So went down there June 4th, which was Thursday, so a few days ago. Pretty good event. I think there was some misrepresentation. I don't know about misrepresentation, but there was like, and I draw the comparison to AEW again, All Elite Wrestling. And you know, people like on the pro wrestling side of things, they're as more tribalistic than even the UFO community. Believe that. But you know, with some of the pro wrestling events, people will take pictures of the events like before they've actually started and post that shit out there and say, look, there's nobody here. People were doing that with this Lou Elizondo event to try and justify to themselves that no one was going to show up for Persona Non Grata in LA at the Regent. That theater was full, guys. I'm here to confirm that theater was full. And it was one of these events where Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp was there, and another guy who I will get to him in a second. Um, but it was full, and it was one of those ones where I was going to ask questions, and then when they got to the Q&A at the end, like 50 people were in line before I even knew it, and I was in the second row. And I look up and I was like, holy shit, there's 50 people waiting to ask questions. To their credit, they got through all of the questions. They went through all of them. They didn't cut short of anything. They went through all the questions. I was like, wow. And then there was a big meet and greet, and it's like 11:30 at night. Lou had said they were already running an hour over, and I said I got to get home. But what I wanted to do is, because she did a great job of this, is I want to share the post, the summary of Persona non grata from UFO Sarah um, over here on X. So let me open up this window so you guys can see, because she did a great job summarizing this. If you're not following Sarah, please go and do so, because when I was on X before all the bullshit happened with the me being banned unjustifiably, I might add, but I'll get over it. Sarah was one of the ones who followed. She did a really good write up on this thing. So let's kind of run through this, because there's a few things I picked up that she didn't, but it's okay. This was one of the big things that she gets in here. Jeremy asked like a lot of questions. He had like 5 of them, and they were very deep and they were very nuanced and asked in a certain way that, my opinion, it felt like Jeremy wanted to know where Lou stood on certain things. And Lou was, my criticism of Lou, even though I believe a lot of what Lou says, he's been very evasive. And that held true with this event as well. Elwood Reed is the other guy who was there at this event. He's an author. I think he does the TV series Tracker or something like that. But one of the things that got asked, that I applaud Lou because he did not shy away. They broke down, and this was George Knapp who put him on the spot with this, to break down the difference between OSAP and ATIP. And Lou didn't shy away from this, which is a big sticking point in Age of Disclosure, right? 2007 OSAP was a contract vehicle for Skinwalker Ranch. In 2009, ATIP was a sub-SAP of OSAP. ATIP's only focus was on the military aspect of the UAP topic. Elements in the DoD and the intelligence community didn't like the people at OSAP for some religious and other issues. So ATIP was created. There would be no ATIP without OSAP. So in general, this is kind of what we thought. OSAP was the big parent organization, whereas ATIP was something that spun out of that was very narrowly focused on UAP. Whereas OSAP had the authority and the 22 million to look into all sorts of this other stuff, right? And it wasn't just UAP, it was other aspects, UAS, USOs, that sort of thing. OSAP was looking at that, whereas ATIP was focused primarily on the UAP subject. Lou talked about in 2012, and this is from Sarah's post, so you can read, the funding stopped, ATIP continued. Lou tried to get money from ATIP by changing the investigatory subject from UAP to ISR. That backfired. The real ISR received the funding, and that was basically the end of the whole ATIP thing. George did retell the Russia story of how he smuggled out the classified documents back in '93, which is cool, but it's nothing that we haven't heard. We heard it at the Senate hearings. We heard it here a little bit more about how the top page was a classified document. Everything else wasn't. You know, it's cool to hear that again, but it's something you've heard before. Jeremy, he was very much expressing his passion for the whistleblowers, the fight for the truth. He wanted to know if Lou was telling the truth. The only way to do that was to put him under oath. So, yeah. And this is, Sarah picked up on this, and I did too. There's camaraderie between Lou and Jeremy. She got the distinct feeling that they do not share confidences. Jeremy was quick with questions, watching Lou's every move, pause, breath for some tell or clue. Here's my thought on this, is that they're friends, but Lou was being evasive, and Jeremy said it more than one occasion. I will accept your answer because we're friends. It wasn't that he liked the answer, but he wasn't going to press Lou because Lou wasn't going to go there, and Jeremy wasn't going to go there on this whole thing. Some of the questions he asked, Jeremy asked Lou, have you ever coordinated a UAP narrative with James Clapper? Lou stated he wasn't going to answer that without James Clapper present. He was concerned about the messaging. So in other words, Lou wasn't going to bury James Clapper at this event without Clapper being there to answer for himself. Jeremy quoted Lou, "History will remember me one of two ways, either as a patriot or being the biggest villain in history, and all I can do is hope and pray. Every day I made the right decision." Asked him what he meant by that. Lou did not want to answer. So here was the weird part that, and everybody, I've talked to a couple people about this. We're like, what? What is this? Jeremy stole the question without knowing it. Sarah did get up on stage at the end. Her question was quick and simple. Is MJ 27 and the committee of 27 from age of disclosure the same? She got a pause and then a maybe. I don't know what MJ 27 is. I've not heard. I've heard of MJ 12, Majestic 12. MJ 27 is one that's new on me. And I asked a couple people about it. They're like, I don't know what that is. I'd have to ask Sarah and see what she thought about that. A couple of things that I picked up that Sarah didn't mention here was that Lou did mention one of the gals got up there and asked, I'm just going to stop sharing this, asked him if the magenta crash in 33 was real. Lou said it was real. Jeremy heard this, his eyes got real big. This gal, because they were trying to get people through real quick, one question and leave. This gal wanted to follow up. Jeremy was like, you just got Lou Elizondo to admit magenta was real. Take your win and go. So, Lou explained that magenta was real and that it was the Italians who weren't sure what this thing was, and they called in the Germans. And this is what, 1933. So this is 6 years before World War II starts, but Hitler is in charge. The Nazis have risen to power. The Axis is being formed as we speak. They didn't know what it was, so they brought in the Germans. I don't know what happened after that, but Lou Elizondo confirmed the same thing David Grush did, that magenta was a real event. Jeremy also asked Lou a bit about the whole 2036 thing. Is there a ship on the way here? Lou kind of went into that whole I can't confirm or deny sort of aspect of things, which is in a lot of ways tantamount to somebody pleading the fifth, where you kind of know what they're intending, even if they're not coming out and saying it. I don't take that to mean that there's definitely something coming in 2036, but there was some evasiveness here and a less than, definitive answer that made you think, well, I'm not sure what he was saying there. But, I mean, that sort of thing. There are other aspects. It's supposed to be released for free. It was a very good event. Very good crowd turned out. Lots of people showed up to see Lou Elizondo in LA. I wasn't that thrilled with the neighborhood where the region was, but that's okay. But it was a good event. Last thing I'm going to do is, before we cut out of here tonight, because this is going a little bit long, but lots of ground to cover, is a couple of documentaries came out. Now, I mentioned that I wanted to see Dean Aliotto's The Experiencers and didn't get a chance to see it at Contact. I did go and buy it, though. I've got through about the first 15 minutes of it here at home. I will probably be reporting on that this coming week. But one of the movies that got premiered Monday, even though I was not at Contact, was Accidental Truth Next, the follow-up to 2023's critically acclaimed Accidental Truth. Ron James did the follow-up for this thing. I did get a chance to see that. And I tell you what, just in case you guys may have missed this on part 2 of the Controlled Distrolshire episode that I did, I'll go ahead and share this trailer for you guys in case you missed this, so you can see what this trailer looks like. And then I'll talk real briefly about what this was about. So let's go here. Here we go.
Hey, there's aliens.
We already know life exists in the universe.
It's been over 8 years since we heard about the government UFO program, ATIP. Are we any closer to an official government disclosure regarding non-human intelligence?
They briefed us on some stuff that was frankly terrifying.
The DoD and the intelligence community is very comfortable saying it's unknown.
What are we actually talking about?
I can't share with you the details, ma'am.
There are those who will stop at nothing to hide the truth.
Whistleblowers are safe. I will guarantee you that.
I have no job. My career has been tarnished.
People have been killed.
It's likely a balloon. A bird.
It's starting to sound like a broken record.
Exotic materials are the holy grail.
I was on the team that was supposed to receive that.
What I really wanted to do was put some materials in the hands of Arrow.
That came from a UFO.
My bit is stuck. We'll have to try something else.
I mean, that stuff should have liquefied like mercury by now.
I thought it should have. I have no explanation for that.
This is a technology that has long since bled into what we call consciousness.
I'm here to drop off the samples.
Could non-human intelligence come in many forms?
Our historical timeline has been interrupted by an alien intelligence.
There is a variety of life forms.
From the earliest times, we've had writings of people interacting with non-human intelligence.
People have accepted these things as real.
All of this has to do with the nature of reality itself.
When I say we're in a simulation, there is something that is computing.
We live in something that has a software program.
It's all about consciousness.
Perhaps we've been guided subtly and deliberately.
All the religions have been telling us that there are other beings.
We're in the middle of a revolution right now.
There is a dark side to disclosure, a secret too terrible to be told.
Our future is post-biological. In a sense, they're midwives or undertakers.
The humans served their purpose.
It may not mean surrendering our spirituality.
You can only beat down the truth for so long.
We're at a point where reality doesn't matter.
We have all new questions. It's time to discover what's next. Accidental Truth. Next, a film by Ron James, narrated by Matthew Modine.
So, what I will say is this movie is every bit as good as the first one. It's got a little bit of a different approach to it. The main things that I could take, they kind of break it down into three things. Like the first part is very much talking about the disclosure fight. A lot of things we've heard before. It's interesting, they talk about the November 2024 hearings where Lou Elizondo, who is it? Lou, is Tim Gallaudet, Michael Schellenberger, and I think Mike Gold were the ones who testified in November 2024. They were feeding. What I did not realize is that these guys, the guys like Ron James and some of these other guys at MUFON, were feeding the questions to Eric Burleson, who was then asking it to Lou Elizondo. And they accidentally got Lou Elizondo to admit about the material transfer that was supposed to happen from Lockheed to Bigelow. Now, tie that into the Lou Elizondo event the other night, the Persona non Grata. They released a document, or they talked about something that had been released in 2023 that pretty much confirmed this exact same thing, that it was Lockheed Martin, because Lou wouldn't confirm it was Lockheed Martin. George Knapp said, well, I'm not under any NDA, and I'll confirm it's Lockheed Martin. But this was all kind of also talked about in the first part of this documentary as well. So pretty cool there. I mean, Kristen Gillibrand saying, oh, whistleblowers are protected, and Dylan Borland explaining, I have no job. Yeah, it's a crock of shit. And Kristen is the one who set up Arrow in the first place, and they're full of shit. And, Sean Kirkpatrick just sitting out there, it's probably a balloon, it's probably a bird. Sean's has been gone for years, and he still speaks out on Arrow more than John Kozlowski does. Go figure. But so the first part was very nuts and bolts like. The second aspect was the more fascinating because they were dealing with the materials. And he saw the Betty Foggins thing, and they have some stuff in there where the material that he's got, the metal sample, he saw a UFO, and he saw some like red metal sort of material in his driveway that he thinks was from a UFO. This has been tested. Of course, Arrow came back and said it's aluminum. They've sent it to other places and come back unknown. You get to see in this where they're drilling into this sort of thing. Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Kristen Gillibrand. She's full of shit. She puts up a good front, but I don't believe a damn thing she said, especially when she goes out of her way to re-up Arrow and all this bullshit. But I'm not gonna. I'll get off my soapbox because I know we got to get out of here. They show them drilling into this metal, and it like amidst this glow. One of the guys, the first thing is, oh, it's a lens flare, it's some photographic defect. But then they got another guy who comes on right away, says it's not a lens flare because of this, and I'm familiar with that. It's like, okay, well, that's kind of interesting. one of the guys is drilling into it. His drill bit gets stuck. You know, a lot of people have tested this and it came back unknown. Gary Nolan had the sample and kind of forgot that he had the sample, which I am a big believer in Gary Nolan, but that was a little bit sus, as the kids would say. They talk about the materials for that. There's like another one where some materials came from Russia, and this was really weird. Like they placed a sample in somebody's post office box in a white box, and there's no way to access this. And the post office gal is talking about nobody can get into this thing. We've never had any issues here. That box disappeared from this dude's, from I think Ron James' mailbox before he could retrieve it. Nobody knows what happened to it. They were able to get their hands on another sample from the Russians, and of course, it came back with some unique properties as well. Then there's a third gal. She talks about like these like orb like globules or something like that. That I'd have to remember exactly, but you should watch it yourself. But it was interesting as well. Let's see if did I get a summary for this somewhere. Exotic materials. Well, they don't. I'm trying to look at the summary, but yeah. ChatGPT gave me something, but it ain't all that great. Anyway, go watch it yourself. The last part they talk about had a lot to do with like consciousness, and this one tied into simulation hypothesis and the general idea that the universe is computing something. And I think that's pretty evident from the stuff we've talked about earlier in this episode, the quantum mechanics aspect of things. The universe is computing something on some level. That is pretty evident. And these guys talk a lot about simulation hypothesis and what's really going on. It's all based in consciousness. And is consciousness is the key to this? Is consciousness the key to AI? What has more advanced civilizations developed? They do some pretty interesting representations of the believed alien species that are here, like the tall blondes and Nordics who look a little bit too humanoid. They don't look more like ABBA. They just like normal blonde-haired Scandinavians. They do an interesting representation of the reptilians who are believed to be hostile towards us and towards the Nordics. Okay. They got the mantids as well, the insectoids. I'm not sure what they are. And then the grays, who most people, they come in different shapes and sizes, but most people align and believe that these are not real beings, that these are like synthetic AI, which anybody who's watched the show knows. I firmly believe that the grays are some form of synthetic AI, that they are not a sentient being per se. They may have some level of sentience, but it's all AI, that sort of thing. But all I can say is this is a really good documentary. Ron James did an excellent job with it. It's bittersweet in one aspect that you get to see Nick Pope. And this may be, I mean, Nick may have done some stuff with some British people, British broadcasters right before he died. So there may be something else coming. But I think this is the last thing he did before the terminal diagnosis had taken place. So it's really cool to see Nick in this role. It's sad as well, and it's bittersweet, but it's one of the last places you can see Nick Pope talking about this. But the cast of characters for Accidental Truth Next that Ron got together is phenomenal, because you got Diane Hennessy Powell, Ross Coulthart, you got Rizwan Virk in there, you got Paul Hynek, you got Lou Elizondo, although it's not current footage, it's from 2018. There's stuff with Gary Nolan. It is a stellar cast of people to get into this movie. It is excellent. I highly recommend watching Accidental Truth Next. It's available on Amazon Prime. Support it. MUFON gets a lot of shit. Probably unjustifiable. I think a lot of people lump them in with the whole Gaia sort of thing. That's unfair and ridiculous, because MUFON does a lot of good work and they process a lot of reports, and they do, their intake form is ridiculously cumbersome. We talked about that in the UAP Summit recap. They're trying to fix that. But I would say if you like the first Accidental Truth, it's got like 28 awards or something like that. Accidental Truth Next is very good as well. I would say to check that out. That, kids, is going to do it for this episode. I've talked long enough. Obviously, this is a big week coming up for not just UAPs, but Attitude of Regression, the network. This is going to be a week where all three, I'll say, branches of Attitude of Regression are probably going to be active this week. And I say this on the UFO side of things on unidentified history. We've got the David Grush event coming up on Tuesday. Don't know what's going to happen. There's a lot of speculation as to what Grush is going to drop. Are they going to go the catastrophic disclosure route, which I don't really know how catastrophic any of this shit would be? Is there the or else element that Ross Coulthart and Chris Como talked about a couple weeks ago, where this stuff, is Grush going to come out and say, you are going to disclose the real shit or else we will? Will Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp be involved? I don't know. What is exactly going to happen? Who's going to be? It's supposed to be bipartisan. It's supposed to get Grush, Luna, Burleson, Burchett, and Moskowitz. I am pleased to see Jared Moskowitz getting more involved in this because we need a Democrat. You got, and this is not political, okay? I'm not making this a political comment, but you got Burchett, Burleson, Luna, all Republicans. Great. Get Jared Moskowitz out there. He's a Democrat. Show this bipartisan interest in this. Let's get a couple people. Schumer might show up. Mike Rounds might show up. Create that bipartisan. You want to get results? That's a good way to do that. Is Grush going to drop the bomb? The stuff that he wouldn't talk about. Will he open himself up like that? Are they going to press this issue? This whole notion of, can I say this? Now, talked about it before. I don't know if saying it publicly on the steps of the Capitol is protected. I kind of doubt it. But can Grush go into a skiff and tell Congress everything? I think he probably could. It's going to be an interesting legal fight if the executive branch wants to fight it. I don't know if they will. They may let it go. I mean, they may say Congress has every right to hear this. I don't know. We'll have to see what happens on Tuesday. But, yeah. I agree. I don't know about Mike Rounds. He's very wishy-washy. That's my opinion on him. Like, he'll say certain things, but when push comes to shove, he backs down. He walks things back pretty quick. That's my opinion on Mike Rounds. But don't know what's going to happen on Tuesday. It'll be really interesting to see what they do with this. I think that stunt with aliens.gov really pissed people off. That was one of the things that was talked about at Lou Elizondo's event as well. As they asked him about that, Lou said that was a miscalculation on the part of the government. They thought they were being cute. It backfired on them. They will not do that again. Somebody asked, well, will they pull that site down? No, they will not pull it. Of course, they're not going to pull it down. They're not going to admit openly that, man, we fucked that one up. They're not going to do that. Will they not do it again? That's a different story. But, are they going to take that site down? No. But you've got this event on June 9th, on Tuesday. A few days later, Mike mentioned it earlier, Disclosure Day comes out this week. Obviously, we'll be going to see that. I have convinced PC Tunney to go and watch the movie. He will be coming on. We will be reviewing Disclosure Day this week. We will be recapping this event on Tuesday, on June 9th, to see what happens as well. I will watch The Experiencers. I will give you my review of that, and maybe I will get in Darcy Weir's Psychic Phenomenon as well. So it'll be another big week for Unidentified History. And then we are going to do the episode on Antarctica. Monday at Contact, there was somebody who did a whole lecture on Antarctica that I missed. I was like, fuck, I would have stayed around for another day for that. But I'm hoping to get the replay on that. On the Attitude of Aggression on the Wrestling Podcast, we are looking to get into WrestleMania 13 for the Big Five project this week. That'll be coming back. Game Gone Wrong, the third branch of the whole our own Attitude of Aggression government, will be coming back as we are going to recap season 1 of House of the Dragon. Next week, we'll recap season 2, and then we will go right into season 3. So lots of stuff going on here at the Attitude of Aggression. That, of course, is going to take care of this whole thing. Of course, if you want to check me out, like I said, you guys know my situation on X. I'm still fighting that. We'll see if that ever happens. But this is the best way to follow what's going on at the show. attitudeofaggression.com. You can go there, check out the website. All the episodes are there. The historical documents for all the cases are there. The historical deep dives are there. You can go and check out everything from the wrestling podcast. Game Gone Wrong is there, so forth and so on. I don't know if this will actually show up, but I will put it up here anyway. The Attitude of Aggression's YouTube, there is a link, but I guess if you click on it, it'll probably take you there. But you can just go to YouTube, search for the Attitude of Aggression, and it'll take you right there. We are on Blue Sky at Attitude Ag. I can actually post that up here. So yeah, at Attitude Ag on Blue Sky, which is the old handle on X. And we're on Facebook where we live stream as well. But that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you for sticking in there with me. The recap of Contact in the Desert, the recap of the Lou Elizondo event, my brief review of Accidental Truth next. So be a big week in the UFO side of things. Obviously, lots of stuff going on. I hope you guys come back and check this whole thing out. It's going to be a big week. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me. Until next time, do the research, study the history. Most importantly, make up your own mind. It's in your hands. We will catch you later on this week for more of Unidentified History. Going to be a big week. We'll see what happens. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will talk to you guys real soon.